Hachette Partworks Limited's second volume of their DC Heroes and Villains collection is a Harley Quinn book, Hot in the City. I've only read one Harley Quinn comic before, that's Mad Love by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, the character's creators, based on the animated series and an episode of the animated series, and that was great. But this is my first kind of like deep dive into Harley Quinn, outside of a couple of issues of the recent Suicide Squad that I've read. We'll get to those at a later date because I think they're going to be collecting those in this Partworks, and so I'll wait until we get there before I give you my thoughts on the Suicide Squad. That might be a long show. It's a lovely cover by Alex Ross, Harley Quinn and the Joker. The stories in this, okay, let's get to them. The first one is a story that was written by Paul Dini, the creator of Harley Quinn, or co-creator of Harley Quinn, and it was written expressly to introduce her character into the print version of the DC universe. In other words, Batman's universe has canon in the comics outside of what had been happening in the animated series, and this does a really good job of doing that. The Harley Quinn that you're introduced to here feels very much like the animated show's character. Likewise, the Joker, the way he's written by Paul Dini, feels very much like the Joker from the animated show. In fact, you can almost hear Arlene Sorkin's voice as Harley Quinn. You can almost hear Mark Hamill's voice as a Joker as you're reading this story. It's one thing Paul Dini does really well is he writes characters with real character in their voice, and they sound unique as you read them. So even if you hadn't heard the voice actors, you would still create separate voices for these characters in your head because that's the kind of writer he is. So this is a typical kind of late 90s kind of comic artwork wise. Yvel Guichet, probably murdered that name, and Aaron Soud are doing the artwork with Richard and Tanya Hori doing the colours. The colours at DC from the 90s onwards have a very much a kind of house feel to them for a lot of their mainstream comics, and they are very polished, is the best way to put it, and they work perfectly well, especially with this artwork, which is somewhere between a detailed, realistic and a very cartoony artwork, and it's good. This is a good comic. It's a decent story that introduces a character into the universe, and people read this, they'll have a complete understanding of the character. They've never seen the animated show, and it does its job, ticks all the boxes. Good wee read. Comic then jumps forward quite a few years to 2014 and gives us 8 issues of Harley Quinn written by Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti. The first one is a 0 issue, Harley Quinn number 0. Don't you just love number zeros? And it's got a whole slew of artists working on it, and this really establishes Harley Quinn as DC's version of Deadpool, breaking the fourth wall and taking the piss and having a bit of fun. The artists are in this all draw a page each, and it makes fun of the artist styles and any quirks that they might have, and yeah, it's a good read, especially if you are a comic book fan and you are aware of who all these people are that are drawing the comic. So you've got artists like Bruce Timm, Adam Hughes, Walt Simonson, Sam Keith, Darwin Cook, and they're kind of taking the mickey out of their own work in this strip, or having the mickey taken out of them. It's a good introduction to a version of Harley Quinn that DC Comics are now giving us, this more Deadpool-like and kind of more extreme version of the character. When we get on to the actual ongoing series, and there's 7 issues of that in here, issues 1 to 7 of the ongoing series for 2014, we've got Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti are the driving force holding it together. The artwork is done by Chad Hardwin for the most part, and colours by Alex Sinclair and Paul Mounts really kind of pull the artwork together. The colours are really important in this version of Harley Quinn and making the comic work, I think, and they do a really good job. I think Paul Mounts does the colours on the actual covers that Amanda Conner draws, and they're especially good looking. It's remarkably realistic in its style, considering how wacky the actual stories are and how surreal the stories are. So it's almost like it's a Looney Tunes cartoon has been dropped into the real world, or into the DC world, and that's quite good fun. These stories are quite enjoyable to read. You have Harley Quinn in a roller derby league. You have Harley Quinn slowly gathering around her a kind of like a family of misfits and characters that themselves look to be quite interesting. Unfortunately for these 7 issues, they tend to take a backseat to the hijinks and the comedic aspects of the comic, and the comic does go quite big sometimes in these areas. There's like a 2-part issue that deals with an old spy who's on his mobility scooter and his various augmented cyborg parts of his body, and he and Harley Quinn go off and take vengeance on some old Cold War enemies of his now in their dotage, and it's one joke stretched too thin over a couple of issues, and I also think it's a bit of a parody of the original run that Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon had on The Punisher, but that run as well was something of a self-parody. So this storyline didn't really work for me. It was at best a 5 or 7 page story, stretched far too thin. It was well done though. I mean, you can't fault the actual quality of the work. It just fell flat for me, and I much prefer this character in smaller moments, and when she's interacting with Poison Ivy and the other characters around her. So, having read this book, my first real kind of introduction to Harley Quinn as she is in the kind of the modern DC universe, and I think it's okay. It's not bad. It's not really making me want to go out and buy Harley Quinn graphic novels or comics and read them. If another one comes along, and I'm sure another one is going to come along from this Partworks, I'll quite happily read it, especially with Amanda Conn and Jimmy Palmiotti involved in it, because they seem quite invested in this character, and while it's kind of all over the place in their approach, it's almost like they're finding the feet of the character, and I'm pretty sure that as it goes on, it'll kind of stabilise a little bit. At least that's what I think is going to happen. I don't know, I might be proven wrong. The extras that you get in these books are limited, but they're pretty good. A little chap called Nick Jones is involved in putting these together, and he does a nice job of giving us some background information on both the character and the actual comics that are collected. There tends to be the odd little interview snippet as well with creators, and I suppose what you would used to call fun facts, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a good way to wrap up the comic. Another good book, quite an impressive little collection this so far. Not one I would normally have bought, but I'm quite glad to have read it. Tell you what though, it was only £6.99 and I got a free book when I bought this, and the free one, now that's the next one I'm going to be reviewing. Here it is here, it's a Superman. It's a good one, and that'll be coming soon. That'll be my 3rd Heroes and Villains collection review. So if you like this video and you want to see me review the entire run of this Partworks, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like on this video. That would be much appreciated. Thank you.